Hey guys, back just a few minutes later. I had to cut that off short. I had a phone call from my child's school, and when that happens, it's never good. But it wasn't bad either. It just turned out I had to take it no matter what. 11/1/2021, breaking down the DFS slate. I was about 20 minutes in when that happened. It's a huge bummer, but I listed the first video at 20 minutes as part one. So kind of pay attention to that. And this will be part two. Go ahead and hit the subscribe and like buttons, the notification bell if you care. At some point, we're going to have an exact, like we're starting at 10:30 every day, and that's that. Probably about 2 weeks away from that at this time. Do the best you can in following as much as you can. It's a bummer I had to break that. It's sort of, I don't know. Maybe you could say unprofessional. That's probably an okay word. But it is what it is. There was just nothing I could do about it. And we're going to come back and talk a little more Spurs. That's kind of where we left off. That's where we're going to pick up. I already said get a bunch of Murray, get a little bit of Pirtle if you want. I like Derek White at 6,100, 32.7 minutes per game, just under a fantasy point. There's three guys here that get just under a fantasy point per minute in a row. They're pretty decent value salary-wise. Keldon Johnson, Lonnie Walker, Devin Vassell all get, Keldon gets almost 30 minutes, but Lonnie and Devin get right around 25 minutes. They average very similar numbers across the board, 0.93 and 0.94 fantasy points per minute, about 22 or 23 fantasy points per game. Lonnie gets, of course, better. Hold on 1 second here. Lonnie gets a better usage rate, I think, and that's obvious. But other than that, Thad Young got some minutes the other day. Nobody knows why. It just happened. We don't know how much he'll play or how much he won't play. Let me get my lineups back up here. We talked about injuries for that team as well. We talked about starting lineup for that team as well. That's pretty much it. McDermott is out. Zach Collins doesn't like basketball. So get some Murray, get some Pirtle, get some White. It's like get a little bit of White, a little bit of Johnson, a little bit of Walker, a little bit of Vassell. There's a bunch of guys you can get a little bit of. Less Vassell, I think, than all those guys, but White, Johnson, Walker, get 15% of them, get 20% of them. I probably will. There's good value to be had in there. And against Indiana, you never know kind of what you're going to get from them defensively. So you can get a handful of Spurs tonight and not feel bad about it. Let's look at Indiana here. Hope you guys had a good Halloween. I did a lot of walking in some boots. I was Jason. I'm very tall, I'm like 6'6", 6'7". I have an awesome Jason mask. Like, kids were frightened out there. It was interesting, so... Okay, looking at Indiana, we're going to talk just briefly about Sabonis, 9,200. I like that. He's been in the optimal recently, I think. $9,200 salary is not bad. 38.6 minutes is fabulous. 1.14 fantasy point per minute. He's a pay-up guy. His value's close to 5x, so you got to look at that. 43.87 fantasy points per game. Don't feel bad about it. Don't feel bad about playing some Sabonis. You got to get to him at 9,200. That's a cheap pay up, if you know what I mean. So Brogdon has a Q tag. Let's look at this really quick for Indiana. See if we can get some updated info on Brogdon. I think he might have played last game. I'm not sure. I think I would have looked. Jeremy Lamb, day-to-day. Karis LeVert, I think you just got to count him as in because he played the other day. Let's see what it says about Brogdon. Missed the past 2 games. Okay. First time has been listed as questionable, which suggests he's moving in the right direction. LeVert feels closer to probable. This is from the other day, I think. Since he made his season debut on Saturday, I have a better idea. So it looks like LeVert will probably play. Brogdon, we're going to have him in for now until we get a little closer and figure it out. Sabonis, Brogdon, LeVert. Brogdon, 8,400, 37 minutes, so he's getting tons of time. 43.1 fantasy points per game. If he plays, you got to play him 5.1x value. There's a bunch of guys that get value on this one. I heard something about maybe it was Chris Duarte who is out, or maybe he's just losing minutes. That could be. LeVert only had 16 minutes in his debut, but 1.45 fantasy points per minute is great. 36.8 usage while he's coming off the bench there. Or maybe he didn't come off the bench. I'm not sure. But his usage is very high. So you got to get to him 5.13x value. Get to maybe that's not right. No, 2.97 value. How is that? I think it's just based on he hasn't played the minutes. Yeah, that's tough. Get to some Levert, though. If you think he's going to get more than 16 minutes, which I think, if he gets 20, 22, 24 minutes, then you got to play him. Miles Turner, 6,000, 27.1 minutes per game. He's hit and miss, up and down. 61 game, 11 the next game, 30 the next game, 40 the next game, 20 the next game. It's like, what do you do with this guy? 30.7 fantasy points per game, 1.14 fantasy points per minute. Usage is low, 5.13x value. You can't fade Miles Turner. I had good luck with him the other night. I'll get to some of him tonight, not as much as the other day, but definitely get to some. Chris Duarte is listed as in the starting lineup, $5,500, 36 minutes a game, 27.87 fantasy points needs to be better, 0.78 fantasy points per minute needs to be better. McConnell will come off the bench. He didn't perform to the level he needed to when it was time for him to step up, and that throws me, but it is what it is. Justin Holiday not in the starting lineup, but he's listed at 31 minutes. I think he was in there for a while. His 0.54 fantasy points per minute found him on the bench quickly. Torrey Craig had a crazy night one night. I don't know what to do with that dude. 16 minutes a game is not worth it, though. So get some Sabonis, get some Brogdon, get a little Levert, get a little Miles Turner, get a tiny bit of Duarte, if you want. That's all I got for Indiana. I think the totals on this game, too, are 217. So not the highest. Not the highest. They could be better. Let's look at Portland and Philly. Starting, I think, with Portland. Let's pull that up. Get this team added back in. Yes. Game. And then bust that down by team again. Starting with Portland. Portland's a conundrum, man. They haven't been playing well, in my opinion. They haven't been putting up the numbers, in my opinion. C.J. McCollum, 8,300. You know this guy can go for 50. Will he? That's the question. What's he going to do? What are you going to get from him? McCollum's usage rate is high, 30. That's great. 1.19 fantasy points per minute. Doesn't hit value. Nobody on this team does. There's not one player averaging 5x value or better. The only saving grace is that like Dame and CJ are as cheap as they are for what they can give you. Their ceilings are high, but they're rare, in my opinion. At least CJ's ceiling is rare. Dame is more likely to hit, at least in previous years, more likely to hit his ceiling. But again, he's not getting the calls. He's not adapting. No injuries on Portland. Dame, CJ, Norm, Powell, Covington, Nurkic is the starting lineup. I like Nurkic. I wish he was getting a couple more minutes a game. 24.8 right now, 34.17 fantasy points per game, 1.38 fantasy points per minute. Gets close to value, 4.56. I mean, CJ gets close to value at 4.78 also. Dame doesn't. Only 4x value out of Dame. It's hard not to place a little bit of Dame just because of the potential of the ceiling. So get to 8% of him or something. Norm Powell's salary looks good at 5,600. His production at 0.81 per minute isn't great. In this matchup against Philly, I'm not sure I'm taking a flyer on him either. Same with Covington, 0.61 fantasy points per minute. His salary's great at 4,400. Love that. Love that he gets 28 minutes. Hate that he gets 0.61 fantasy points per minute. I mean, what do you do with that? It feels awful. So for me, I'm just fading all those guys. Anthony Simons, 22. I mean, he's getting close to value, 4.83 value, but he's got to get minutes. 22.2 is not going to produce much. 0.91, I mean, I guess that could be worse. DSJ getting no minutes at all. I mean, 11 minutes a game so far. There's nothing to say there. I don't like Portland's night against Philly at all. You want to get to a low percentage of McCollum and Lillard just based on their ceiling, especially Lillard, fine. If you want to get to a little Nurkic and a little Norm Powell to fill out some value spots, you can. I don't love Nurkic tonight. I like Powell better just because of the salary. I'm fading everyone else. If you got to squeeze a little Covington in, you can, but it's probably not going to pay off. So keep that in mind. Let's look at Philly. Always clicking the wrong thing. My deal. Like that, if I had a middle name, nickname, it'd be like Jon clicking the wrong thing B. All right, let's look at Philly's injuries. I'm guessing just off the top of my head, and I know it's going to be a shocker, but I'm thinking maybe. Well, that's weird. Maybe Embiid has a Q tag, but it doesn't look like he's listed in the starting lineup right now, so that's interesting. Just going to check the news. Embiid set to rest. Well, that opens things up a little bit for Portland. Not a lot. Maybe play some more Nurkic, I guess. Starting lineup, I mean, injury report right now, Simmons, of course, Riller. Embiid's not on it, but he is resting, so that's interesting. Maxey, who's not helped me at all. Curry, who's not helped me at all. Danny Green, who I never play. Tobias Harris looks good. Andre Drummond looks great. Those two guys, get a bunch of Harris, get a bunch of Drummond. Embiid's out. We don't need to talk about him. Simmons is out. We don't need to talk about him. Toby, $7,400. Gotta love that price. 33 minutes a game, 37 fantasy points a game, 1.12 fantasy points a minute. Hits 4.98x value. That's the same diff as 5. Nothing not to like there. Gotta love that. So you're gonna have to get some Toby tonight. I mean, he's gonna be chalk. It's gonna be chalky chalk. Same with Drummond, 5,400. He's, he can't look at his average minutes per game if he's starting, but even if you do, he's getting 1.46 fantasy points per minute, tearing it up down there off the bench. His numbers are not going to apply as easily tonight as far as his value and his minutes, just because he's going to get more. So, I don't know. For me, I'm going to get a bunch of Drummond. I'm going to get a bunch of Harris. A lot less of everybody else. Maybe a little bit of Seth Curry, maybe a little. Probably less Maxey. Maxey hasn't been doing it for me lately. Maybe a little. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be harder. It's going to be hard because Drummond isn't Embiid, and these guys aren't going to be as open. I like the idea of Korkmaz, but I would never play him. At least not right now. Everybody else down the list. I mean, does George Niang get some backup minutes? Does Charles Bassey see the floor for more than 2 minutes? I don't know. I mean, you definitely can get Drummond. That's for sure. So where do you think you go for a backup center here? I mean, George Niang? That's all I can think of. Yeah, looking at position. So, I mean, Thibault has a good defensive core in him. He had a bunch of stocks the other night. I don't know. I'm skipping him. So get to some Toby, get to some Harris. Get to some Toby, get to some Drummond. Play a little Tyrese, a little Seth Curry if you want, and move on. That's it from Philly. Toby and Andre. Big on the list. Liking it. There hasn't been much else for people, yeah. Okay. Well, let's look at the next game. Combined on that one was 220.5. Washington, Atlanta combined 223.5. Take a look at that. I think we'll start with Washington. Washington's become a scrappy team. It's very interesting. Very interesting to watch. Could be an interesting game against Atlanta, too. Atlanta, this could be kind of a back-and-forth type of deal. Atlanta hasn't been living up to what they could be either. They're not playing enough Herter. Playing maybe a little too much Hunter, in my opinion. But let's look at injuries. Washington, Gafford day-to-day. Anthony Gill day-to-day. Cassius Winston out. Rui, nobody even knows where that dude is. Thomas Bryant, nobody. So you're looking at Spencer Dinwiddie, Bradley Beal, KCP, Kyle Kuzma, Daniel Gafford with the Q tag. He's listed as quadriceps day-to-day. Right now we'll have him in, but, keep an eye on the injuries before lock because you might have to get rid of him quick if you put a bunch of him in. Or maybe you put your final lineups in after. I don't know. Starting with Bradley Beal, 9,100 is a pay-up option, is a good price. 37 minutes per game is great. 42 fantasy points per game is great. 1.15 fantasy points per minute is great. 35.7 usage is great. His value is hard because of his salary and the team that he's on. I like Bradley Beal tonight against Atlanta. You've got to get some Beal. I'm going to get a bunch of him. I like Harrell a little bit, 7,700, 1.22 fantasy points per minute, basically 5x value. I like Kuzma at 6,900, 0.97 fantasy points per minute, doesn't quite do it for me. He hits value, but it's like, step it up a hair, dude. Quit bleaching your hair and start stepping it up a hair, I like Spencer Dinwiddie, 6,900. I wish he got a couple more minutes, but 1.12 fantasy points per minute. Second highest usage rate, 26.8. Nothing not to like there, 5.08x value. Everyone else is a fade for me. KCP doesn't produce 0.57 fantasy points per minute. I mean, you put me out there, I'll get you 0.6. I'd guarantee you. I mean, I'm tall. I could shoot a little. I could pass the ball a little. Don't put me out there. I'll make a fool of myself. But I could get you 0.6 if I had to, if I was his age. Potentially. I'm lying. Don't listen to me. Get some Beal, get some Harrell, get some Kuzma, get some Dinwiddie. Get more Beal than anybody. Everybody else, your choice. Let's look at Atlanta. Man, I always do that. I always do it. I go to game first. I shouldn't. All right. 223 is the combined. 223.5 is the combined. So you can get some players from this game. Trae Young at 8,700 is hard to pass up. Anytime you get a pay up option at under $9,000, it's like, what are you doing? 1.22 fantasy points per minute, 30.8 usage, 41 points per game fantasy wise, 33 minutes, 4.7x value. Get some Trae Young. Get some Trae Young against Washington. It's a pace up spot for them. You're going to need him. John Collins, same thing, 6,500, 1.23 fantasy points per minute. Big guys get less usage, but 5.4x value, the only one on the team averaging 5x value or better. I'm going to get a bunch of Collins. Just gonna. I'm going to get less Capella, maybe none. I'm going to get a little Reddish, maybe, probably not. I don't, Bogdan, 5,100, I like the price. If you think he can go off tonight. But 28 minutes a game, I'm not sure what to do with him. You're going to have to start looking at DeAndre Hunter. I mean, his price is low. 28.4 minutes per game, but 15 fantasy points per game. 0.55 fantasy points per minute. His value is atrocious. You're going to have to take Hunter out of the starting lineup eventually. I mean, to me, if you're going to play someone at the 3, I mean, I'd rather have Huerter in their undersized or Herter in their undersized. So, tough one for sure. Play some Trae. Play more John Collins. Fade everybody else. There's not another good play on this team. There just isn't. Unless you think Gorgie Jang's going to get 35 minutes, which you won't. But if you think Capella's going down and that's what's going to happen, then play a little Gorgie. Everybody loves Gorgie. Let's look at the next one. Bulls at Boston. Bulls at Boston. Add this one back in. Go to game. Bulls at Boston. Here we go. We're going to start with Chicago. Chicago's interesting. I'm not sure I don't think they're built to win it. I think they think they are. I think they think they're close. I don't think they are. They'll get in the playoffs. They'll maybe get home court. Maybe second round. Can they win it? I doubt it. Let's look at injuries. Let's look at Atlanta's injuries first, because I skipped over that, and I tend to do that, so sorry, guys. Just a Congo, nothing to talk about for Atlanta. Okay, Chicago, Boston. Patrick Williams, out indefinitely. Kobe White, December. That's it. Starting lineup, Lonzo, Javonte Green, Zach LaVine is in, DeMar DeRozan, and Vucevic. It looks good. Bunch of defensive guys. Vuce, pay up option 8,400. Love that. If you think about Trae Young and Vuce in the same lineup, you're getting under $9,000 for each. Can't complain about that. Even LaVine at 8,100 is awesome. Vucevic, 34 minutes per game, 40 fantasy points, 40.6, 1.19 fantasy points per minute. Good usage, almost value. LaVine, 8,100, 34 minutes, 38.5, 1.12. This guy's got like a 60-point ceiling. So it's hard to say, screw Zach LaVine at 8,100 when the dude can give you 50 or 60. DeRozan's playing well at 7,600, 34.8 minutes, 39.1, 1.12 fantasy points per minute. High usage over 30, 5.14x value. Can't complain about that. Same with Lonzo, 6,600 on that. I love that price, 35.2 minutes per game, 33 fantasy points per game. Not quite a fantasy point per minute guy. He's got to get up there, in my opinion. He just has to. I mean, if you want Lonzo to succeed, he's going to need a fantasy point per minute. Maybe he needs to just pass the ball a little more. I don't know. I haven't really looked at his actual breakdown. 5.03x value is good, but you want to get more than that out of him. You can. Caruso gets minutes at 4,900. If you think he's going to get more minutes or more usage, which is super low, I mean, you can do that as a value option. Nobody else is really viable on this team. Get a bunch of Vucevic, get a little more LaVine, squeeze in a tiny bit of DeRozan, a tiny bit of Ball. Against Boston, this could be a slug out. This could be, they have it at 217.5, but this could be like a 90 to 87 type of game. It's going to be interestingly hard for me to get tons of these guys. Probably more LaVine than anybody. LaVine and Vucevic than anybody. I like those pay up prices for them. That's pretty much it for Chicago. Let's take a look at Boston. Okay. Jason Tatum, another pay up under 10 grand, 9,400. I mean, against the Bulls, though, it's a pace down spot, so I'm not sure that that's going to be the right move. 39 minutes per game, 45.5 fantasy points, 1.16 fantasy points per minute. Very high usage at 33. I love that. You know, you can get a little of him if you think you can get, you know, if you think you can't get more fantasy points for 9,400. I just listed 3 guys that can get you more fantasy points for $1,000 less. There's one on the team, Jaylen Brown. $8,400, $1,000 less, more minutes, over a fantasy points per minute, as good a value, almost as many fantasy points per game. In this matchup, I'm going Brown over Tatum all day. I'm going Al Horford over both of them also at 7,600, 1.46 fantasy points per minute. It's hard to fade. 5.8x value, that's highest on the team. Next closest is Schroeder at 5.04, of which I'll probably get a little Schroeder. Time Lord, I always like getting 1.09 fantasy points per minute, low usage because he's a big guy, almost value. There's a couple of guys you got to play on this team. Probably no Tatum, a tiny bit of Brown, more Horford and Williams, and then more Schroeder than anybody. Skip and Marcus Smart, 0.7 per minute, it's not going to cut it. Josh Richardson's not getting the minutes or the performance. If you think he's going to, you can play him a little bit because he's so dang cheap at 4,400. But Grant Williams has gotten more minutes than him, so maybe you got to go that way at 4,100 if you need some value. I don't know. I'm going to get Al Horford. I'm going to get Time Lord. I'm going to get probably more Schroeder than anybody. A little bit of Jaylen Brown. Move on from Boston. Nothing fancy. Toronto at Knicks looks painful. 208.5 total. We're not going to spend much time on this game, I think. We'll talk a couple plays and a couple players and get on with it. Let's see. There we go. We're going to start Toronto at Knicks. Toronto. Always kind of how it works out. I don't love playing players from this team. I just don't. Let's look at Toronto's injuries. Oh, we should look at Boston's injuries too. There's no injuries, so that's fine. Toronto. Utah and Pascal. Nothing happening there. Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., Anunoby, Chris Boucher, Precious. Those are your starters. Fred VanVleet, $8,000. The guy has a high ceiling, but it's like a super, super rare high ceiling, like a once every, I don't know, season and a half type of high ceiling. It's hard for me to get to him. I always end up with more of him in my crunch than I want. I've just been totally fading him lately. 8,000, 38 minutes is great. 36 fantasy points, 0.94, not quite value. I mean, it's like, what do you have to say about that? Such a low-scoring game. I'm probably just skipping him altogether. Anunoby, same type of player, 7,300, bunch of minutes, not even a fantasy point per minute. None of these players are. Hard for me to tell like any of them. Just moving down the list, you know. Just moving down the list. Scotty Barnes, not in the starting lineup. Which sucks. 6,700. He's getting 35 minutes a game so far. If you think he's going to get close to that, you can look at that as a value at 67. 4.96 value is probably as close to 5 as you're going to get from him. Gary Trent hits value, but 5,400, that's okay. 0.87 per minute's not enough. Precious, same thing, had a couple of good games at the beginning, but 22 fantasy points per game is not going to cut it. Chris Boucher is in the starting lineup. That's who you're going to get to. If you're going to get 30 minutes out of him at 1.17 fantasy points per minute, you got to have him. Based on his numbers, you don't play him. But based on him in the starting lineup, you do have to. So get to a bunch of Chris Boucher. I mean, that's all you can do on this team. If you like Van Vliet, some of these guys, do your worst. Maybe a little Gary Trent. But for me, Scotty Barnes, if he gets the minutes, and Chris Boucher are the plays on this team. I don't like this game. 208.5. There's not much to even think about. I mean, if you're going to get to players on this game, get to Knicks. Get to some of the Knicks here first. Not that I like the Knicks. I don't. I can't stand them. Never liked them. Tibbs is terrible. That's from a Minnesota fan. I put up with years of Tibbs screaming and being awful. So... you can like him all you want. He's never going to get you out of the first round. Maybe the second round. It's the East, so maybe the second round. Sacrilege, I know. There's players on the team I love. Love some of these guys, for sure. Julius Randle, pay-up option, 9,500. 1.25 fantasy points per minute is coming down a little. You got to get 45 out of him, though. 4.9x value. 46.6 is his average, so you're likely to hit value, But he's the most expensive player. Kemba has not been producing. 1.0 fantasy point per minute, but 27 a game. He needs more usage. 19's not going to cut it for a guy that plays a point. 40A has never done one thing for me. 0.89 fantasy points per minute. RJ Barrett, I had a good night with him the other night. I don't think in this matchup you can get to him. I mean, maybe if 2 or 3, 4 or 5%. Mitchell Robinson, same thing. You can't get to much of him. The only saving grace there is maybe that Vucevic isn't that good defensively. But for me, it's Julius Randle on this team. I love Derrick Rose as a human being. Former Timberwolf. I loved listening to him talk. Smart guy, wants to play forever, does the best he can with what he's given. It takes him 11 hours of prep every day to play. Taj Gibson's another professional. Just love the guy. They got to get away from Tibbs, though. They just do. I mean, Derrick Rose said the other day he wants to beat Tom Brady and play well into his 40s. Well, you can't play well into his 40s for Tibbs. You just can't. So, play a little Randall, fade everybody else. That's it for the Knicks. Terrible. Terrible. Okay. Not trying to be smug. I feel like I'm coming off smug today. Well, whatever. Had a rough night last night. Not a lot of sleep. Let's see who's next. Denver at Memphis. Might get to a bunch of players in this game. Okay, let's look at injury reports. Kankar and Murray still. That's it for Denver. Here. Starting with, of course, Denver. 11,200 is a lot of money. It's hard not to get to him, though. Jokic, 30 minutes a game, 53 fantasy points a game, 1.77 fantasy points per minute, almost a 32 usage. Value doesn't matter at $11,000. It's close enough. You're going to have to get to some of him. His ceiling is so high. If he gets to 70, what are you going to do without those points? It's tough. What if he gets to 80? I've seen him do it. He can do it, right? I mean, it's hard. You got to get to some, maybe even if it's like 10, 15%. You're going to have some Jokic lineups, period. There's no way to avoid him. Everybody else on this team is terrible. Michael Porter's got the potential, but doesn't ever show up. Not since he gets on his money. Will Barton, 5.09x value. I mean, you can get to some Will. I don't mind Will on this team. Got a bunch of guys who are sort of mid-level guys that just, if you feel like Bones Highland can get 20 minutes, that would be a move. Kind of a contrarian sneaker. Play Jokic, play Barton, fade everybody else. That's it for me for Denver. I mean, I'm going to like Memphis probably better. Although, maybe not as much. I don't know. 215.5 is not inspiring for the total. Not at all. Not at all inspiring. Let's see. I already got that. Let's go back to team. Memphis. Yeah, nothing fancy happening here. Morant, 9,900. I think you can get, 47.8 per game is not bad on 35 minutes. 1.36 fantasy points per minute. Doesn't hit value, but close. You can get to a little Morant if you don't mind the pay-up option. I think that the defense from Denver is pretty good. But I think that Morant is better than Monte Morris and Will Barton, so I think that he's going to have a good opportunity to get his numbers. Some of these other guys, the ones that are going to suffer, Jaren Jackson's a fade. Steven Adams is a fade. He'll probably be in foul trouble. 1.12 fantasy points per minute. It's great. Gets close to value, but he's probably going to, like I said, end up in foul trouble. I like the Anthony Melton at 6,000, 1.04 fantasy points per minute. These guys' usage is pretty low. He does hit value, 5.15x value. I mean, so you can get the little Anthony. But the couple of guys I get to a lot are Melton and Bane. They put up very similar numbers. They're both fantasy point per minute guys. They both are getting around 30. They're both 5x value. Their salaries are both decent, 5,800, 6,000 respectively. People like Slow-Mo, people like Kyle Anderson, 0.99 fantasy points per minute. It is what it is. He's getting 21 points a game fantasy-wise, so you can't go crazy on a guy like that unless there's an injury. Play a little Melton, play a little Bane. Get some Morant if you want. Fade everybody else. That's all I've got for Memphis. This is a game, another one. It's just one of these low-scoring games I'm just going to kind of try to stay away from. Orlando at Minnesota has Screamer all over it. They have it listed at 215.5. I think this game to me, and maybe just to me, has blowout potential. I think Minnesota could win this game by 30, and I'm a little bit of a homer, but I just realistically, if the shot's falling, which has been a problem, if it's falling, the chance for blowout is high. We're going to start with... we should start with Orlando. Oop. Orlando's interesting. There's not one guy over 7K on here. In fact, 6,800 is the highest salary with Cole Anthony. I didn't look at Memphis's injuries. Let me look real quick. Just Dylan Brooks. We knew that. Nothing fancy there. Let's look at Minnesota while I'm looking. No injuries at all. It's so crazy. We're so used to being injured out here. Cole Anthony, $6,800, 33 minutes, 34 fantasy points per game, 1.03 fantasy points per minute. Usage should be higher. 23.5 is not enough. Dude should have like a 29 usage. 5x value is fine. Mo Bamba, hit or miss, 1.04 fantasy points per minute. 5x value, also good. Get to a little Mo Bamba. Get to a little Cole Anthony. If you feel like Wendell Carter can have a big game, 1.09 fantasy points per minute is fine. Value's almost there. Those are the three guys I'm looking at. I think Suggs will be highly owned. You can get to a little Suggs because his salary's so good at 5,100. You can get to a little Franz Wagner, although 0.76 fantasy points per minute is uninspiring. Doesn't hit value. Get to a little Cole Anthony, get to a little Bamba, get to a little Carter. I'm fading Suggs tonight. He'll help you build lineups with bigs if you're going studs and duds or stars and scrubs. Someone to look at as a value play potentially. Minnesota's defense has been off the hook. It's just totally crazy right now. Watching them is like watching a swarm of bees. Denver got away lucky because Minnesota just shot so poorly the other day, like 21% or something. Had they shot even 29%, that game would have been a 30-point blowout. Hot take, I know, right? I don't love the total on this one. 216, 215.5. Not a great total. So get one or two players here and then move forward. Let's look at Minnesota. I like Minnesota, but I'm not going to load up on him either. One or two players maybe. Got to get a little cat because he's of the ceiling again. 10,400 is 10,400. 34 minutes, 45 fantasy points, so 1.33 fantasy points per minute. If you have to pick between him and Jokic tonight, it's like 50-50. You get the same amount of both of them if you can. Just because both of them have low totals. I mean, Towns has a higher total in the game, so maybe get to a little more of him. They're playing Orlando, so the chances of him booming is high, in my opinion. Value is not quite there. He's expensive, but 1.33 fantasy points per minute is hard to ignore. Anthony Edwards is a stud, not going anywhere. 35 minutes per game, 37.98 fantasy points per game, 1.08 fantasy points per minute. Usage over 30. Value is real close. Russell's hit and miss. It depends on the night. Some nights are huge, some nights are not. 0.99 fantasy points per minute. He needs more. Pat Bev has been hitting value. 24.4 fantasy points per game. A little bit of a resurgence. 1.14 fantasy points per minute. You need some value from a guy. Pat Bev at 4,800. You got to get to some of him. Jared Vanderbilt may produce, but it's going to be almost all in stocks. 3.5x value is probably not worth it. I do like the price. Malik Beasley's interesting. $4,500, 22 minutes a game. 0.8. He's not going to be a 0.82 guy for long. He's a guy that has and does and can average 20 points per game. I mean, so it's going to be mostly shooting, but the upside is there for someone like Beasley. The potential is low, but the upside is there. So that's going to be sort of a judgment call. Man, there's a bunch of players I love, but they just go in spurts. Jaden McDaniel's another guy who you're going to get all of his points in rebounds and stocks, but he just doesn't produce per minute enough to matter. So get some Towns on the level of Jokic. Get a little Anthony Edwards. Get some Pat Bev. I mean, as a value play, 1.14 fantasy points per minute, 5x value. His price is cheap, 4,800. Can't complain about that, dude. I mean, some people probably could. Former Clipper fans and so forth. Is that it, you guys? That can't be it. No, one more. Oklahoma City at LA. All right, let's look at that one. Minnesota, no injuries. I guess I didn't look at Orlando's injuries. Each one more. Michael Carter Williams, Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac. Nothing that we didn't know about. Well, all out indefinitely. Starting lineup for Minnesota: Russell, Edwards, McDaniels, Vanderbilt, Towns. That's their killer starting lineup. They should be able to defensively lock down just about anybody with that. The question is, where's the points going to come? D'Angelo Russell has an off night shooting, and Anthony Edwards is going to end up having to score 50 points to win. That's the hard part on that team. Let's look at OKC and at LAC, and then get the frick out of here. Sorry, guys. I just have a lot on my mind today. It's up late. Stuff going on. Got a doctor's appointment in a little bit. OKC, no injuries. That's good for them. They're young, though, so they should be pretty free of injury, you'd hope. Let's start with them. Spread on this one, 210.5 total, so another low-scoring game. I mean, it's like, what do you got to do with a team like this? I'm not so sure it's going to be as low as people think. I mean, this is one of those ones where I think Vegas might have it wrong. Of course, who knows? I'm proven wrong all the freaking time, so take my advice with a grain of salt. You know, when I say it's like moderately solid advice, I mean it. Oh, you guys are funny. Shea, 7,200, 33 minutes a game, 33 fantasy points a game, a minute, fantasy point per minute, 28.2 usage is great, doesn't hit value. Nobody on this team does. There's not one 5x value player on the whole team. Josh Giddey's the closest at 4.94. I like his price at 6,000. I like his fantasy points per game at 29.6, 1.05 fantasy points per minute. Usage is way too low. There's only one guy getting close to 30, and that's Shea. Everybody else is in the teens, it feels like. Baisley at 20. Roby just doesn't play. Pogo Stick doesn't play. You know, they're playing the clip. This has blowout potential written all over it, so maybe that 210 total is maybe off. I don't know. Maybe the whole fourth quarter is garbage time. I don't know. Get a little bit of Shea if you want, 7,200. Get a little bit of Giddey at 6,000. I mean, you can get to Dort, but 0.69 fantasy points per minute is uninspiring. It's nothing to write home about. You know, Baisley, is he in the rotation? Is he going to play? How many minutes is he going to get? 26.5, according to this on average, but what's he been getting lately? 25.3 fantasy points per minute, 0.96 fantasy point per game, but 0.96 fantasy points per minute's okay. Get a little Shea, get a little Giddey, get a little Baisley. That's it. Let's look at the clips. Clips. Not a big Clipper fan. Never liked them. Is what it is. Paul George finally paying up for him, 10,100. But dude's averaging 1.52 fantasy points per minute. That's got to be top few in the league. Top couple for sure, I think. 50.3 fantasy points per game. Against Oklahoma, he could put that up in like 2.5 or 3 quarters. So that's something to think about. 33 minutes per game. 5x value, basically. 34 usage. I mean, you got to have a bunch of Paul George. With Kawhi out generally probably for the whole season, you're going to have to get a bunch of Paul George basically every time he plays. Keon Johnson, Marcus Morris, Preston, Leonard, Ibaka all out. I guess Keon Johnson's listed day to day. Reggie Jackson, Eric Bledsoe, Paul George, Batum, Zubats. I'm not a Batum guy. Guy has made way too much money in his career for not a lot of production. A lot of bench time for him. You can get to a little Reggie Jackson. I don't like his per minute, but in this matchup it might work out. 34 minutes per game. Eric Bledsoe is a pleasant surprise. You know, 0.97 fantasy points per minute. Might as well be 5.14 X value. His price is right, 5,000. Get a little Bledsoe. Feel good about it. You know, Terrence Mann gets minutes, but doesn't produce. Nick Batum gets minutes, but doesn't produce. Zubats is a total fade. I mean, he does produce, but 21 minutes a game at 0.99 is not going to get you anywhere. Ibaka's injured. Kennard's interesting. If he can get some minutes, he's not in the starting lineup. But if Kennard gets the minutes, I mean, he's getting 27 minutes, 21 fantasy points per game. But if he can tick that up, his 0.77 minutes per game, or points, wow, 0.7, it's Monday, right? 0.77 fantasy points per minute. I mean, you could get a little Kennard, 4.9x value. Hartenstein's interesting if you find that he's going to get minutes. I mean, like I said, with the blowout run here, if and it's a big if because it's a coin flip, if the Clip end up in a blowout situation where they're sitting their starters for most of the fourth quarter, Hartenstein could get some extended run. He could go from 16.5 to 23, 24, 25. If you think he's going to get 25 minutes, you know, Hartenstein's a 1.1 fantasy point per minute guy, 4.54 value. Maybe you're going to have to get a little of him at $4,000. That price can't be beat. It's a great price. So, I mean, maybe look at that. The closer we get, the better we'll know. That's the late night hammer, you guys, at 9:30. So it's going to be a little bananas. Get some Paul George. Get some Eric Bledsoe. You can get a little Reggie Jackson if you want. Man, that's it. If you want to take a flyer on Hartenstein at like 12%. You know, he's a guy that might be chalky tonight. I don't know if people think the blowout is real. I'm not so sure. I am not so sure that the blowout is real. Like this could be one of those 90 to 87 games. It could be 120 to 118. It might be 130 to 80. You know, it's like this is the kind of game just hard for me to get into. There's a bunch of low scorers tonight. I'm going to not have a lot of Oklahoma City and LA. I'm not going to have a lot of Orlando at Minnesota. I'm not going to have a lot of Denver and Memphis. I'm not going to have much Toronto at Knicks. I'll probably not have a lot of Bulls at Boston. I mean, I'm not going to. I mean, the only game that has a good total here is Washington and Atlanta. I'll get a bunch of those guys. Philly at Portland, 220.5. No Embiid. So I'll get some Philly guys. I'll get some Portland guys. Probably more Philly guys than Portland. 217, San Antonio, Indiana's a little uninspiring. You don't know what's going to happen with Brogdon. 221, Cleveland, Charlotte. I'll get some guys from there, too. There you have it, guys. 9 games up, 9 games down. As well, I got to stop. You know, I always like, you know, there's people I watch that I accidentally mimic sometimes. So if I do that, forgive me if you happen to be watching. But we all get our inspiration from somewhere. So do the best you can tonight, you guys. I got a bunch of appointments. I've got a bunch of running around to do here, which I'm going to do. And we will go from there. Hang with me. That is pretty much it for the games. Went quicker than I wanted. Started part 1, come to part 2. Please hit the subscribe button, hit the like button. I'm not trying to make a penny out of this. I do this anyway. It just gives me an opportunity to kind of get it out of my mouth and sort of into my brain a little better, a little more clearly. Like spew it out and then have the paper kind of tell you what you mean. If you can figure out what that means. You know, I don't know, you guys. It is what it is. It's Monday, day after Halloween. Walked around a lot, ate a lot of candy last night. Had a little back and forth with the wifey, a little spat. Nothing terrible, but it is what it is. And it, you know, makes the next day sort of harder. So she knows I love her. I know she loves me. Life is good. Life is good. Kid stuff, you name it. There's stuff all across the board. It is what it is. Look, I have a great time coming to you guys. I have a great time hanging out. I got to figure out my lighting a little more because I keep getting washed out slightly. Yeesh. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Oh, that's too bright. Oh, that's too bright. All right, well, for the next one, we'll get it worked out, contrast and all that. I'm working on some banners and logos and some of that kind of junk. So that's fun. Eventually, that'll all be worked out. I've been playing DFS since 2013. I've been streaming for like 2 weeks. So I don't know the ins and outs of it. I do the best I can for now. There'll be transitions. There'll be fun things later, you guys. This is not later yet. We're just trying to get down the breakdown of the games. They're going much better. I think we've got some much more concise information. We're not getting contrived and recommending 9 players per team. You know, a couple here, a couple there. Matchups are important. Lines are important. Other than that, I mean, I'm yabbering. I got to get going. But other than that, you guys, this has been Jon B, the One DFS Breakdown for 11/1 November. It's crazy. It's in Minnesota. It's going to snow soon. I don't know what to do with it. I'm like wearing shorts right now. Anyway, have a good night, you guys. We'll come at you tomorrow. I've got a bunch of tests and stuff, doctor stuff. Hopefully all goes well, but we'll probably come to you later in the day tomorrow, probably after 4 o'clock, sometime between 4 and lock, depending. So pay attention for that. Maybe I can get to it early in the morning. I doubt it. Probably try to sleep in if I can. All right, guys. Done rambling. Have a good night. Win some money. Then share it with me.